My name is Michael Carmichael. I'm the Senior Director, Library Editorial at Sage Publishing. And I've been at Sage for a long time, 24 years, actually. Um, for those that don't know, Sage is an independent publishing company. And in fact, our founder, Sarah McCune, recently passed on her shares of the company to an independent trust, already to guarantee it that it will remain that way for forever, which is fantastic. And it means that we're free to focus on all sorts of things, not least supporting fantastic research initiatives like one or two you're going to hear today. So today's agenda, I'll just introduce a couple of the sort of key themes you're going to hear about from some fantastic research presented by Dylan and Adam, and I'll also be introducing our presenters, and then Lisa will be closing off with some reflections on the research in terms of what this raises for the academic librarian. So I'm really thrilled to welcome our session presenters today. First of all, we have Dylan Ruediger, who is a senior analyst at Ithaka S+R, where he leads a team studying the research enterprise. Prior to joining Ithaka S+R, Dylan coordinated a national initiative to better align doctoral education with changing professional opportunities within and beyond the academy at the American Historical Association. He holds a PhD in history from Georgia State University and a BA in critical theory from Hampshire College. We also have Lisa Forrest, who serves as the Leyland M. Park Director of the Davidson College Library. Recipient of ACRL's 2021 Excellence in Academic Libraries Award. Prior to arriving at Davidson, Lisa led the research and design team at Hamilton College's Burke Library and was an associate librarian for SUNY Buffalo State. She is a fellow of the EDUCAUR's Leading Change Institute, the Western New York Library Resources Council's Leadership Institute, and recipient of the Excellence in Library Service Award from the Western New York Library Resources Council. And last but not least, we have Dr. Adam Frost, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Toronto and Simon Fraser University. He completed his PhD in the cognitive neuroscience of vision at the University of Toronto with support from the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. He is the author or co-author of 8 peer-reviewed publications on the topic of visual perception and motor control, and is now concentrating his attention on creating methods for eliminating the disconnects between science and the general public using experimental methods. So very big welcome to our presenters, and they'll each come up in turn to present their work and their reflections. But just before I bring them up, just want to sort of summarize the key themes. There's some fascinating themes from the research that's being presented today. So the first one is that we've seen the rise, I think, of video in the last few years, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years in higher education, and that it does deeply impact instructional learning in newer ways, perhaps than traditionally realized. So some of this fabulous research you're going to hear about today is showing that actually visual media can elevate data and scientific literacy skills, which is obviously of central importance to the librarian, of course. We've known about feature films and documentaries being particularly valuable and useful and seen as traditionally instructionally critical, but we're seeing other video content types that may be as relevant or critical. Hybrid, online, or blended learning is very much here to stay, and video is a key part of that. And so as a group, we've discussed and agreed that I think we need to empower stronger multimedia teaching and learning across campus. Both vendors need to have a stake in that, faculty, instructors, and the librarian too. Is a key message, we think. And then lastly, librarians, instructors, and vendors should work together to create better shared knowledge and understanding about video and effective pedagogical practices. For example, sponsoring research initiatives and actually coming to conferences like this, but also more broadly in the academy, making sure that knowledge is shared, because there's a lot in development and there's a lot of fascinating stuff to understand. So with that, I'll ask Dylan to come up. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks everybody for turning out this morning. I've already been introduced, so I'll skip that part, and I'll just say that I'm here to speak for a few minutes about a series of research projects that Ithaka S+R has been conducting over the past year in collaboration with 24 colleges and universities in the United States, Canada, and Germany to study the question of streaming media and the relationship specifically between library collections and instructional practices. This research has had two parts to it. The first, which was published this summer, was a national survey of librarians who had responsibilities for streaming media acquisition at their institutions. That survey really focused on trying to understand what kind of services libraries were already subscribing to, how they felt about the features that were available to them, and to better understand the decision-making process that informed what collections librarians are purchasing, as well as kind of a big picture understanding of how streaming media fits into libraries' material budgets, both now and going forward. The second part of our study, which I'll be previewing today and will be publishing later this year or early in 2023, was a series of semi-structured interviews with faculty from a wide range of disciplines. Altogether, we did just shy of 250 of these. And these interviews were designed to get an in-depth perspective on how instructors are teaching with video, why they teach with video, and what kind of support needs they feel like they have. The survey that we performed this spring, one of the major findings was that when libraries are considering what streaming media to license, that instructional purposes are really driving their decision making. This was the top factor that librarians cited as a reason for acquiring streaming content. And this seemed to really reinforce the second part of our study, which was that if you're making decisions based on instructional use for a certain kind of media, it becomes really important to understand as much as possible about how that media is being used, why it's being used, so that you can make really informed decisions about how to align what you're purchasing with what instructors need, want, and use. As I mentioned, I'm going to be talking specifically about that latter question today based on the findings from the interviews that we are in the middle of analyzing right now. And I'll emphasize just again that these are preliminary findings. They may change on the margins, and they certainly will become better articulated as we move through the analysis and writing. But I wanted to share a few kind of high-level findings today that we're seeing from across disciplines and fields and across colleges and universities of very different types of institutional characteristics. On the question of why instructors value video, and this is video in all kind of modalities and formats, we see a large consensus across fields. This is true of psychologists, of chemists, of film and media studies, English, what have you. And the reasons that they like to use video in their classes come down to, as an alternative to reading, there's a very widespread sense that students are less willing to read than they have been in the past, and that presenting media to them in a format that is not text-based allows them to actually consume and read or learn what they're supposed to be learning. Indeed, many of the faculty that we interviewed are using video, at least in part, to replace what used to be text-based reading assignments. Beyond the fact that students will actually, click on the link and look at it, there's a sense that video is really useful because it is kind of visceral and engaging in a way that other formats of communication are not, and that students really kind of empathize with, understand with, and internalize video in a way that is pretty unique to the format. And finally, faculty use this to break up their lectures, to provide a moment of different perspective, different people, different topics, and to kind of make their classrooms more multivocal than they might otherwise be. The faculty that we interviewed, I should mention, are probably somewhat atypical in that they are people that librarians already had on their radar as heavy users of the media. But it's really important to note that the faculty that were interviewed in this survey don't just use video at the margins of their classes, they incorporate it right into the center of what they're doing. In fact, a very large number of them use some form of video in literally every single class, sometimes in class, sometimes as in a flipped classroom context, but it is used continuously and regularly by many of these instructors, so they rely quite heavily on it. And for the most part, faculty have made the switch to streaming as their preferred, or in many cases, only format for showing video. And this happened quite some time ago, roughly in line with the way our own habits of how we consume entertainment at home have changed. And they prefer video streaming as a kind of format very much because it is perceived as more accessible to students and more convenient for students. Faculty said over and over again that they knew that their students may not have access to a DVD player or may have lives that were complicated in ways that made it difficult to them to go to the library, to a viewing room, and that streaming allowed them to consume the material on their own time, at a place of their choosing, and in ways that fit within their lives. That said, faculty also reported that when they thought about where to go to find content, the library was one of the last places they ever looked, and they largely did so only if they struck out everywhere else they wanted to look. Indeed, it's pretty striking from these interviews how rarely the library comes up as a source of material. Instructors are overwhelmingly preferring to go to YouTube and Vimeo and other kinds of free web resources as their place to find content to show to students. And for the most part, faculty were very satisfied with the selection of material that was available to them on those kind of websites. The reasons why they preferred those sources, there are quite a few of them. Two that I would point out in particular is that faculty are often showing clips and not whole videos. And there is a perception that YouTube is a better place to find that one scene you want to show from a documentary or a movie, and to easily do that in a way that a commercial streaming option makes more difficult. And also that students, and frankly also faculty, reported being relatively easily deterred by library discovery and accessibility, and much preferred a link you could just click on, didn't have to sign in, and could just use. However, it's important to note that this is one place where disciplinary differences matter, at least on the margins. There were several types of instructors who were much more likely to say that they were unsatisfied with what was available to them on the open web. And in particular, these were film and arts faculty, so media studies, film studies, and people in the performing arts, who reported that they often struggled to find canonical films, art movies, particular performances that they were interested in on YouTube. Part of this is because these faculty were particularly likely to have a very specific thing that they wanted to show their students and were not as inclined as other faculty to accept a substitute. A historian might want to show something about the civil rights movement, and if they can't find Eyes on the Prize, they'll find one of the many other documentaries about the civil rights movement and make do. Whereas a film professor may have a very specific reason to want to show a specific film, and if it's not available, that's a real problem for them. They also reported that in some cases, concerns with the open web resources, and in particular, I thought this was quite interesting. There were concerns about their ability to vet the quality of material on the open web, and also some faculty expressed reservations about both the commercials that are on those platforms and the algorithms that suggested videos, which had at least the potential to either undermine the lesson they were trying to teach, or in some cases, expose students to misinformation and other kinds of extremely sketchy material that the algorithm will pull up if you're looking at the Armenian genocide or something like that. these are just a couple of the things that we found, and we don't have very long today, so I'll reserve further comments until the Q&A. But I just wanted to give a kind of high-level picture of some of the things that faculty are thinking about, and in particular how they're engaging or not engaging with library resources, which I think Lisa will touch on more as we move on about how that impacts and affects librarians and their decision-making process. So thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out this morning at, what are we, 8:45 or so? It's really nice to see you. My name is Adam. Thank you, Michael, for the very nice introduction. I'm a scientist, I think I can call myself at this point. And I've been doing some work recently around this topic of academic publications in general. So for instance, we all know academic publications, peer-reviewed articles, love them. Scintillating topics like how blended and flipped instructional programs have improved upon pre-pandemic norms, or one of my favorites, transcranial magnetic stimulation over posterior parietal cortex disrupts transcatic memory of multiple objects. Love it. Now, I didn't always love it, though. These are difficult to read as a novice, as some of you might have experience with. And however, when you're an expert, they are extremely efficient because it's communication between experts. You can anticipate that the person reading it has about 10 years or so of experience in this field, so you can leave out a lot of minor details and just get to the point. However, even though they're great, this, as scientists, is usually the only way we disseminate our findings, which is not great, because that means, for instance, that the general public is largely unaware of what we're doing. Of my 8 co-authorships, maybe 100 people have read them. You know, it's a very, very small group. So the general public, they don't know what they're getting for their dollars. All of it's publicly funded in my instance. And so that means that unless it's translated by an intermediary, it's not going to be known. But being translated by an intermediary has some potential issues. What is the incentive of that intermediary for doing that translation? They're not doing it for nothing. And then also, do they have the skill to faithfully translate and communicate that research? And do they have the desire to faithfully communicate that research? Or are they going to put a spin on it, as you might have seen during COVID from time to time? And so this is problematic. Likely contributes to scientific mistrust. And us as scientists not being out there communicating our findings to the world translates into things like being seen as cold and inaccessible others, where there's good evidence suggesting that that's the way the world sees us. And then there's the problem of a lack of an authoritative account of the work, which means that scientific misinformation and misrepresentation is arguably the norm, which again, huge problems, costs lives, in fact. Now, one area where I saw explicitly the difficulty that people have with academic articles was grading undergraduate reading and writing assignments, where they read articles and wrote essays in response to them during graduate school, where I graded over 1,000 of these. And I observed that almost no students actually understood the core concepts of the assigned articles, which was my experience. I didn't understand them the first time I read them as an undergraduate, but it was interesting to see how little students are getting knowledge-wise and understanding-wise from these experiences. Then I was speaking to the students during office hours. They are often dumbfounded about this. They're maybe star students from high school who did great at everything, and now they're finding that they maybe didn't understand that they didn't understand. It's a lot to process. And this is an issue because we need new experts. We, as a species and as a nation, are facing incredible challenges in the times ahead of us, such as, for instance, climate change. You know, there are big unsolved problems with climate change, energy storage devices, last resort measures like carbon capture that we haven't figured out. There are problems here and they need to be solved. And current approaches aren't working. We need new innovative ideas from new innovative people and from new perspectives. And all experts began as novices at some point in their lives, even though we forget it sometimes. And the problem is that STEM is difficult, in part because of the process of learning to read academic articles. The time-honored tradition for teaching students to read and write about academic articles is to say, do it, and figure it out, and let them hit that wall, and hopefully they'll do better next time. We have harsh grading practices and extremely high expectations in STEM. You can see here in this data from the National Center for Education Statistics, delivered by Woodavine and Atwell in 2020, that even if you graduate from a STEM major, you can see in red, this is the average GPA across time in school for a representative sample of STEM graduates across their education. And you can see that even for STEM graduates, the non-STEM courses give them better grades. Their not expert topics are providing better grades for them. And what this translates into is that disproportionate numbers of women and less advantaged people drop out, switch out of the STEM subjects. We don't have them anymore, which means that we are losing great future scientists who might not have had, a mother who's an engineer who can say, stick with it. Here's a strategy that you can do to get through this. That means that we're only, by and large, getting people who are traditionally on that STEM path. And this makes sense. There are warmer welcomes in other subjects, as that previous graph showed. So how many potential scientists are we losing? We don't even know. Yeah, so one possible solution that I came up with to help ameliorate this situation that SAGE also independently came up with is to have scientists explain their research via video. So I would like to live in a world where any peer-reviewed publication that's published, the scientist creates an accessible explainer, presents it via video, in a way that's accessible enough for novices, but substantive enough for other scientists, maybe from another specialization, to benefit from. They might have their morning coffee and broaden their research diet by learning about something interesting from another field that they might not have heard about otherwise. And that would, ensuring that it's of high quality information would help confer those benefits to the students as well, and create a rich learning environment. Now, as a cognitive neuroscientist, I'm always very critical of research and of my own research, and I want to know, does this work? And I wanted the highest quality of evidence to tell us whether this works or not. If it doesn't work, I don't want to suggest this. So I wanted to do an experiment. And this is difficult in pedagogical contexts, especially when there are grades involved. Students don't love it. But I was able to team up with a professor at U of T, great guy, Steve Jordans, who is himself a cognitive neuroscientist, but also teaches an enormous intro psych class of about 1,800 students. And he was up for doing a randomized controlled experiment in this class of 1,800 students on a real assignment for real grades, which is just a fantastic way to get data and a fantastic real-world sample of that population. And so we created the assignment where a traditional academic reading and writing assignment, students read an academic article, had to summarize the results, and do a critical thinking component where they suggest an extension to that research. And so we had two nice studies that we also had video explanations for from the scientists. One was my own creation with a colleague of mine, a fantastic scientist named Ruediger, also a cognitive neuroscientist, about narrative lingering, a subject that students might find interesting. If you read a book, it affects you for some time after. And Ruediger was able to see why the brain might do that. Fascinating. And then Nick Allum presented research, this is from the SAGE Research Methods Video Library, about why some people think astrology is scientific and how he came to his conclusions about why that is using a statistical method, multiple linear regression. And so with the materials for the assignment in place, we randomly assigned all students in the class to one of two groups behind the scenes. One of them had the usual reading, writing assignment experience where they had all the usual help, the assignment resources, assignment instructions, grading rubric, access to the prof if they have questions, so on and so forth. And then, excuse me, the other random half of students had access to the video condition where they received that exact same assignment verbatim, except they had the option to watch the explainer videos that were just embedded into the assignment materials. And so again, this included the SAGE Research Methods video case study shown before, then one of my own design. And yeah, again, same papers for the two groups. And in the end, we had 1,200 students agree to share their data with the project, which again, really nice sample size that I'm very happy with. And so students completed the assignment, and then I wanted to know if learning was robust. So I, 5 weeks later, followed up with the students, invited them back to do a follow-up quiz. And so I expected that these videos, my hypothesis going into it, is that it would enrich the learning experience. I thought it would make academic articles less intimidating. You know, instead of looking at that wall of text and a few graphs, you have the human explaining it to you. So they're giving you the core concepts, you know, hopefully creating something of a connection. You're seeing who's doing the work. So my expectation was that the videos would make the paper less intimidating. And I collected information about this using something called the Intrinsic Motivation Inventory, 3 of the subscales from that measure things such as how able the student feels that they were able to do the assignment, to what degree they enjoyed it or not, and if they thought it was valuable or not. And these are all correlated with academic success in a lot of areas. And then I also thought it would, the video explainers, having that solid foundation of the core concepts to build off of and jump into the rest of the article with, would enhance knowledge and understanding durably. And that's why we did that follow-up quiz, which we designed in a very particular way to make sure that students couldn't just watch the video and then do well in their robustness of learning measures. So the quiz did include core concept questions that were covered by both the video and the article at the same time. But most of the questions did not cover specific information from the video. Some of them were information covered only in the academic article, so the video would not help you there. And then critical thinking and application items where you had to apply the concepts that you learned to new situations. So again, not explicit information in the video. So these non-video questions comprised most of the follow-up quiz. And so what we found is that across all of the intrinsic motivation inventory subscale items, the bars in blue are people in the video condition, and the bars in gray are people in the no video condition who had the usual experience. And you can see that all of the blue bars are higher than all of the gray bars for students' perceived competence, to the degree to which they enjoyed the assignment, and the usefulness, how valuable they thought the assignment was. And as a whole, that was statistically significant, suggesting that students, it was more like they were more prone to want to do the assignment than needing to do the assignment as you usually do, than students who didn't have access to these videos. And then in terms of the durability of the learning experience, this is the real bread and butter as far as I'm concerned. Did students do better with retaining information and understanding of the article's information? And again, blue bars are students with the video access. Gray bars are students without video access. We observed that students who had access to the videos did 14% better on their knowledge and understanding quiz scores than students who did not have access to the videos. And that, again, was statistically significant overall. And this all really hinges on the fact that students actually used the videos, right? Because if they didn't watch them, then those groups would likely be identical. You wouldn't see any difference. So this is already telling us that the students, at least some of them, watched the videos. And I was quite struck by the fact that of students asked, 91% reported that they watched the videos when they had access to it, which is surprising. I was expecting half, 70% or so, but almost everybody who had access to the videos watched the videos. And then also, the people who watched the videos overwhelmingly found that they helped to some degree, which is nice. And in fact, 52% said that they helped a lot. So students use them and they find them helpful. So what I have taken away from this is that students with access to the videos overwhelmingly watch them. They find them helpful. And it seems to actually help make the exercise less alienating. And this translates into robust long-term knowledge and understanding. And in terms of value to educators and learners, I think it goes without saying that it's a very high benefit to cost ratio. It takes all of 30 seconds to paste a video link into your assignment directions, and you get all these benefits as a result. It's great. I hope that everyone does it. And it's demonstrably effective. So scientists, everyone who can, it would be great to encourage this practice of creating accessible explainers of the science, the academic work you're doing, so that students can get more out of the experience, help with their scientific literacy, and really let's take the brick wall down a couple notches if we can. Thank you.
All right, how much time I have? Okay, all right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for showing up this morning, especially after the big boat party last night. I want to give a shout out to my team who's here in the front couple rows here. I'm here representing Davidson College in Davidson, North Carolina. We did participate in the Ithaka video streaming study, which was a lot of fun. I also want to give a shout out to this great group of individuals. We had just a great time putting this together, and especially to Michael for inviting me to participate on this panel. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what this kind of raises for us as librarians. I did really enjoy meeting with our faculty to talk about their experiences using streaming. It did surprise me, I have to admit, especially knowing how much we spend on these resources. So the first question here that I want to put out to everyone in this room is, how do we really align with curricular needs? So we heard Dylan say that, most of the faculty are finding the things that they want out there from other colleagues on YouTube. The things that I found in my conversations with our faculty was, they're not using what we have. And it's very bespoke. For the folks that I talked to, most of them were teaching languages or teaching about language in some way. So, the things that I heard from them were, they want authentic materials, news, documentaries, art house films, real people having real conversations versus educational film. And they all were, the film was central to their teaching. It was not anything that was ancillary. It in many cases replaced the text. I asked a lot of good questions, and when it came down to it, they already had titles in mind. They weren't really interested in chatting with the library. They love the library. They trust us, but they were more likely to talk to a colleague who was teaching in the same field when they wanted to find out some good titles. They might put it on Twitter. They might put it on Facebook. Hive Mind, what do you think? And I think we've all seen that in real life, actually. So, this is the way at least we work at Davidson. For the most part, we have a lot of faculty who come to us with titles in mind that they haven't been able to find freely on the open web. And one of the questions this raises to me and to the group is this really the right way? Is there a better way? How can we be working with vendors to find the things that our faculty really need to use so that maybe we can have a just-in-case approach versus this just-in-time approach, but what would need to change? I have some notes here real quick, make sure I got everything here. Okay, that's it. To back up a little bit more to what Dylan was saying earlier, what what I found in the interviews that we held at Davidson was in fact the same. Faculty want a high quality viewing experience. Sometimes that's not what they're getting on YouTube. The commercial aspect of YouTube, absolutely a thing. The other big issue is access. So at least for the faculty that we worked with at Davidson, they want their videos to have subtitles in multiple languages. So access was very important. The other big thing that they want is to be able to pull those clips and embed them right into the learning management system. Very important for them. You know, the way the pandemic has changed the way that students and faculty are using video cannot be underestimated. Before the pandemic, many of them told me they were still into this old school way where they want to reserve a room in the library and get everybody together. And they have realized now that they'd much rather flip it, you know, give the work of the video to students to do outside of the class. So having the options is really important here. And then lastly, the question that this really raises for me, and I know to Kelly, is what this means to our budget. Yeah, we are spending a lot of money right now. We have done a few things at Davidson that I think are helping our budget. Kelly put together an amazing LibGuide. I encourage you to look at it. That really gives some clear guidelines to faculty. We don't hide what these things are costing us, and I think that does help us. Our faculty want to support us, and they want to support our budget. So we are very transparent about what this stuff is costing us. We also, you know, we reach out. We're a small college. We are able to have really close relationships with our faculty. It's hard though. You don't always know everybody. So we are trying to encourage faculty to talk to us about alternatives if we don't have what they want. Kelly's done a great job also of, you know, talking to faculty about what they really need in terms of a limited or perpetual type of license. I would continue to do that as well. And then this final question, like, what are we really doing just in case versus just in time? Again, I go back to, is there a better way? And this is a question I think I'd like to pose to the group. So that's pretty much all I had. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and everybody. And I think we have a bit of time, five minutes. Erin is going to help with the Q&A. If there are any questions from the audience for any of our panelists or myself, please raise your hand. I think we have one near the front.
Hi, I'm Nicole Branch from Santa Clara University, and I had a question for Adam. Did you do any demographic analysis? Curious if there were more benefits for certain demographic groups over others in terms of streaming video integration.
Yes, very good question. That was part of the plan. However, the data that we actually got out of the experiment was more limited than we thought in terms of demographics. So we have not seen a lot in there. We did, for instance, look at personality measures. You know, you might expect someone who has ADHD or so on, who might have a harder time paying attention to something like an academic article, that they might benefit especially from having that explainer beforehand. To get them into it so that they can dive deeper into the article. However, we just didn't have enough people with that kind of data. So effectively, there could be things there. However, we need to take a different approach to get more comprehensive samples of these measures to be able to get at that. I think it's extremely plausible that there are differences, and it could be that representation matters as well. We happen to have 2 men with this first stage, which is not ideal. It's for the follow-up to this, we had 2 women actually, and I would like it to represent people from many different backgrounds, because it could be that seeing a person who you relate to innately could perhaps affect the way that you take in the information, and it can help perhaps make it feel like that career path is more open to you. So I think that is important when we want to get at it in the future.
Yeah, question near the front.
Yeah, my question again, also for Adam. So, besides some of the motivational factors that you were talking about related to video, I was curious, do you know, maybe there is like research on how, concepts expressed somehow in video could enhance reading capabilities, just in general? I don't know if there's anything out there, but it made me think of that. Like, is there a way, because really what you were getting at is information, right? And so somebody can understand and have knowledge, I mean, regardless of the text, but could video somehow enhance people's reading capabilities?
I'm interested in, that's an interesting question. You could get at it from a few different ways, and you could actually read our data to suggest that that does happen. Because we did see, for instance, didn't have the data up here, but it looks like understanding scores in particular, the questions that are asking students to apply concepts from the studies, are higher in the groups who have access to the videos. And that, it's hard to say precisely how much of that is coming from the video and how much of that is coming from a better understanding of the article. But it's extremely plausible that, again, having that accessible explainer to help get you into the content does allow the words to hit home instead of just bouncing off. I've had that experience reading academic articles where you try to read it and you just don't have an in, and I read the same paragraph 5 times and I'm like, why am I not getting this? Whereas once you get it, it's like, oh yeah, I get it now. So I think it's extremely plausible, and that's a question we should look into more specifically. I don't know about specific findings in that area personally. Thanks.
So I think we have time for one. Do you guys
One
have time
more?
for one more?
Okay. I think near the back.
Good morning.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I'm Jing Guo from Florida International University. Thank you for the sharing this study. It's very interesting. I was wondering whether Adam could clarify the students who participate in the study. So are they graduate, undergraduate, or they are mainly focused on STEM? So does the STEM include medical, students? So that's the first question. The second question is the implementation on this, because in the past, traditionally, we want the students to get ready for the class, right? We ask them to prepare to read something before they come into the class. And in this streaming video creation, so the instructors kind of find a way to demo the concept in the video format. So does that mean what kind of skill sets differently from the traditional instructor in order to create those videos? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. For the first question, the intro psych, so it's an intro psych course. So most students will be first-year students. This was done in the fall term, so it's likely their first term as well. However, the intro psych course is very popular at the university. About a third of enrolled students end up taking this intro psych course. So it's by no means only STEM students. It's popular across domains. Some of those might eventually go on to medical school. I think it's a fairly common course for eventual med students to take. However, they're probably a minority in this sample. And for the second part of the question, the videos are mostly, so the concept is that it's the scientists presenting their work. So it's the scientists, the instructor's role in this situation would be to find the material and include it and integrate it into the assignment. I'm not sure if I can, if we have the microphone, if I could ask for a bit of clarification on that second aspect. Yeah, just so I can better answer that.
Thank you. So basically, yes, you could create some kind of original video clips like yourself, you mentioned in the SAGE, case study collection. And some instructors can integrate certain video clips into their course materials. So either way, I was wondering if you do want to create your own video clips, what kind of skill sets
I see.
for instructors? Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that is a big question. There's a lot of need there because videos, scientists, woof. My colleague that I worked with, just as an example, to create the pilot video, a great scientist, great communicator, one of the most charming people I know. However, he needed a lot of coaching to actually get a usable video that students might find interesting and watchable because he started talking like a scientist when I asked him to present. So it took scripting back and forths about how to make this into something accessible. So that's just, even not taking into account the technical aspects, yeah, a lot of support is needed from these people, and I'm not sure about the logistics of that. I believe, Sage, when you create videos, there's probably a lot of support for the presenter in that process. And I would like to see this much more common. So I would love for universities to have coaching available. I would like to have production facilities available, editing support. And a lot of universities already do have some of these resources. I would love to formalize that relationship between scientists and whoever's providing those resources, because that is a key element of actually making this happen. Good question. Please.
I think that just makes me think about the future of the library and some ways that we could start supporting open in a new way, in fact.
Yeah, that'd be
I also wonder actually whether or not another approach to that would be to have the students make the videos. This is something that a lot of instructors are already doing and that a lot of students already know how to do, both from a technical perspective and also in terms of understanding how to communicate to people that are also students. And so I would be interested to know at the end of the day what the value of asking students to make these videos as opposed to even the authors might be.
That's a great idea. Yeah, love it.
So,
Okay, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for coming to our licensing and learning session. And I just want to finish by saying a massive thank you to our presenters on the panel, Lisa, Adam, and Dylan. Thank you so much for joining me today and presenting some wonderful insights, which I hope you've all found valuable too. And we'll be milling around afterwards. I will be, at least, if you have further questions. But thank you again for coming today.